In Gombe State, one man received 136,933 votes. His nearest rival, just 1,140. In Sokoto, Atiku got over 68,000 votes, while Amaechi got just 292. Does that look like a primary or a coronation? Tonight, Amaechi is calling these results concocted. Hayatudeen has boycotted the collation, and the ADC's own spokesman can't even tell you if rigging happened. The opposition is eating itself alive. Tonight, I will give you the real numbers, the law, and what this actually means for 2027. I don't do gossip or headlines, I do evidence. What happened in the ADC primary yesterday is a mirror held up to Nigerian democracy. In this video, we are breaking down the real state-by-state numbers, what the Electoral Act 2022 says about how this primary should have been run, why Amaechi's legal fight could trigger total chaos for the party, the deeper agenda behind this entire situation, and what it means for Tinubu in 2027. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you will understand this situation better than most political analysts in the country. Before we go any further, let's be real. While others were sleeping last night, I was cross-referencing these numbers against the Electoral Act and the ADC Constitution to build this breakdown for you. Nigerians deserve analysis that goes way deeper than a noisy Twitter thread or a vague press release. But this independent work takes a massive amount of time and effort. The only way I know this content matters to you, the only signal that tells me to keep going, is your subscription. So please, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait until the end. Do it right now to support real, deep analysis that Africa deserves. Now, let's get straight into the facts. To understand what happened yesterday, you need to understand what the ADC was supposed to be and what it became. The African Democratic Congress is not a new party, but in late 2025, it became something new. It became the convergence point for Nigeria's most powerful opposition figures. Atiku Abubakar left the PDP, the party he helped build, the party he contested 3 presidential elections under. Rotimi Amaechi came in, Peter Obi joined, Rabiu Kwankwaso joined, David Mark came aboard, even Rauf Aregbesola. In Ibadan, they made a public pledge, a single opposition candidate against Tinubu in 2027. The press called it historic, political observers called it a coalition that could actually win. But history in Nigeria teaches us one thing consistently. The moment the cameras leave a unity summit, the knives come out. Within weeks, the deep fractures emerged. Who gets the presidential ticket? Is it zoned to the south? Does Atiku as a northerner have the right to contest after 8 years of a northern president in Buhari? Does Peter Obi's Igbo base get priority in a post-2023 Southeast solidarity play? The Supreme Court had to intervene to settle a leadership dispute, validating the David Mark-led executive, but remitting substantive party matters back to the Federal High Court. Then Peter Obi walked. Then Kwankwaso walked. They went to the NDC, citing, and I quote their own words, a toxic environment and endless litigation. So, yesterday's primary was not just Atiku versus Amaechi versus Hayatudeen. It was a wounded party, bleeding from the Obi Kwankwaso departure, trying to prove it can still hold a primary and produce a credible candidate. That is the stakes. That is the background. Now, let us look at what actually happened. Let me take you through the official numbers, state by state. I want you to listen to these numbers carefully, because numbers never lie. We start in Gombe, where Atiku secured a staggering 136,933 votes, leaving Amaechi with 1,140 and Hayatudeen with just 453. Moving to Sokoto, Atiku sweeps 68,823 votes, while Amaechi drops to 292 and Hayatudeen gets 319.
Over in Zamfara, it's Atiku again with 60,500 votes compared to Amaechi's 19,1 and Hayatudeen's 436. Over east in Kebbi, Atiku pulls 65,523 votes, with Amaechi getting a small bump at 5,931 and Hayatudeen finishing with 454. Down east in Anambra, Atiku brims in 58,566 votes, Amaechi climbs to 17,085, and Hayatudeen secures 7,861. In neighboring Imo, Atiku locks down 52,222 votes, leaving Amaechi with 7,659 and Hayatudeen with 1,121. Up north in Yobe, Atiku records 44,841 votes, while Amaechi gets 300 and Hayatudeen gets 365. In Nasarawa, Atiku brings home 41,649 votes, Amaechi gains 13,665, and Hayatudeen follows with 6,744. In Abia, Atiku holds the lead with 25,133 votes, but Amaechi fights back with a strong 18,339, leaving Hayatudeen with 2,264. Out west in Oyo, Atiku gathers 23,111 votes, with Amaechi at 1,553 and Hayatudeen at 568. In the nation's capital, the FCT, Atiku polls 18,740 votes, closely chased by Amaechi with 14,721, while Hayatudeen takes 5,576. In Ekiti, it's 18,395 votes for Atiku, 1,574 for Amaechi, and 149 for Hayatudeen. In Ondo, Atiku registers 18,287 votes, Amaechi pulls 6,031 votes, and Hayatudeen finishes with 875. And finally, we look at Bayelsa, the lone exception. Here, Amaechi completely dominates his stronghold with 44,404 votes, leaving Atiku trailing far behind at 6,570 and Hayatudeen at 939.
Now, I need you to sit with those numbers, because those are not just victories, those are obliterations. Those are the kinds of margins that, in a general election, would suggest a landslide. But this is not a general election. This is a party primary. These are delegates, party members, people who organized and signed up and paid dues. Here is the question I want you to hold. How does a party with a contested internal structure that has just lost its two most nationally visible members in Peter Obi and Kwankwaso, how does it suddenly produce those kinds of participation figures in a primary? And this is exactly what Amaechi is asking. In his statement on X, he said, "There is no way that about 80% of members of the party were not allowed to vote, and you expect me to accept such results." He described them, in his own words, as concocted. His support group, the Movement for Amaechi's Presidency, went further. They alleged that in Imo State, the exercise was moved to undisclosed locations without the agents of other aspirants present, in violation of both the ADC Constitution and the Electoral Act 2022. Hayatudeen, for his part, did not just reject the results, he boycotted the declaration entirely. He said he personally witnessed some of the irregularities and announced he would not attend the official collation at Transcorp Hilton. And here's the detail that I find most damning. The ADC's own National Publicity Secretary, Bola Abdullahi, told Sahara reporters, in words that should chill every Nigerian Democrat, that the party does not have enough evidence to support or deny the rigging allegations. That is the party's spokesman about his own party's own primary. I want to challenge the popular narrative here. Many people are saying Atiku won fairly. He has the north, he has the structure. And it is true that Atiku has deep political infrastructure. But political infrastructure does not explain a 100-to-1 margin in states where Amaechi and Hayatudeen campaigned actively. The responsible analytical position is that something about this process demands scrutiny, and Nigerians should demand it. What the law actually says. Let me put on my legal hat for a moment, because this is where most commentators get lazy. They say Amaechi can go to court, but what court? Under what law? With what grounds? Let me break this down. Section 84 of the Electoral Act 2022 is the primary provision governing party primaries in Nigeria. It mandates that party primaries must be conducted in a manner that is transparent and that aspirants and their agents must have the right to be present at voting and collation centers. If agents of an aspirant were excluded, as alleged in Imo State, that is a direct violation of Section 84. Section 84.5 of the same Act says that a political party that has published its candidate list but violated the primary process can have that candidacy voided. That is the nuclear option that Amaechi's legal team will be calculating right now. The ADC's own constitution, its own internal rules, requires that direct primaries allow all registered party members to vote. If 80% were disenfranchised, as Amaechi alleges, that is not just a moral argument, that is a constitutional one, and the courts have jurisdiction. Now, the legal trajectory. If Amaechi files suit, first, he must exhaust internal party dispute resolution mechanisms under the ADC Constitution before approaching the Federal High Court. That is the doctrine established in Emenike versus PDP and many subsequent cases. The Federal High Court then has jurisdiction under Section 87 of the Electoral Act. From there, appeal lies to the Court of Appeal division sitting in the relevant state and ultimately to the Supreme Court. But I want to tell you what history teaches us about these cases because I have watched them for decades. Nigerian courts have consistently held that primary election matters are largely internal party affairs unless a specific statutory provision is violated. The burden of proof is on the challenger. Amaechi needs documentary evidence, results sheets, agents' testimony, INEC monitoring reports, video footage. Without concrete evidence, the courts will not disturb the primary outcome.
Let's be honest. You won't find this depth anywhere else. We didn't just read a press release. We broke down the exact numbers, the Electoral Act, and the raw political truth of this primary. That takes hours of real work. If you appreciate analysis that digs beneath the surface noise, hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 2 seconds, but it keeps this channel alive. Once you've subscribed, drop a comment below. Do you actually believe Atiku's numbers are legitimate, or do these massive margins look suspicious to you? Stick around because up next, we are exposing the deeper agenda behind these results, and it changes everything. Who gains, who loses, and what this is really about. Now let us talk about what this is actually about, because Nigerian politics is never just about what it appears to be on the surface. Atiku Abubakar has been chasing this presidency since 1993. He ran in 2007, 2011, 2015, 2019, and 2023. He has never won. And yet, here he is, in a new party, in a new primary, with margins that look like landslides, positioning himself for attempt number 6 in 2027. The man's resilience is either admirable or alarming depending on your political perspective. But here is the calculation behind his ADC move that most people are missing. When Peter Obi and Kwankwaso left ADC for NDC, they did not just leave, they took a significant southeast and northwest political base with them, which means that an Atiku-led ADC is now structurally a more northern-tilted platform. That is not an accident. It is a deliberate repositioning. In 2023, Atiku lost the north to Tinubu and the southeast to Obi. In 2027, his strategy appears to be consolidate the north under a single Atiku ADC platform and use that as the foundation for a broader coalition.
The margins we saw in Gombe, Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi, and Yobe, those are not just primary results. Those are a public statement. The North is still mine. Now, what about Amaechi's rejection? I want to suggest to you that Amaechi knew he could not win this primary. His own Bayelsa result, his one confirmed state victory, says everything. He's a southern candidate in a party that, after Obi's departure, is structurally weighted toward the north. His legal challenge, if it comes, is less about winning the case and more about keeping himself relevant and keeping his name in the 2027 conversation. And Hayatudeen, the respected economist who ran on policy and substance, his campaign exposed a painful truth about Nigerian democracy. Voters, or in this case delegates, do not vote on policy, they vote on power, patronage, and political machinery. Hayatudeen's ideas deserved a hearing. His vote totals suggest he barely got one. The 2027 implication is this: we now have Tinubu and APC on one side, an Atiku-led ADC on another, and a Peter Obi and Kwankwaso NDC coalition on a third platform. The opposition, instead of uniting behind one candidate, has fractured into at least two major competing platforms, and that, my friends, is exactly what helps Tinubu sleep at night.
Let me give you 3 scenarios. Not prophecy, but informed analysis from someone who has watched this system for a long time. Scenario 1. Atiku is declared winner. ADC consolidates. Probability 55%. Final collation concludes. Atiku is formally declared. Amaechi's legal challenge either is not filed or is dismissed at the Federal High Court for lack of sufficient evidence. Hayatudeen fades from the race. The ADC presents Atiku as its 2027 candidate, and the party pivots to negotiating a running mate that balances the South, most likely Yoruba or Igbo, to compensate for the structural weakness left by Obi's exit. This is the most likely scenario based on the current trajectory. Scenario 2. Legal challenge delays and weakens ADC. Probability 30%. Amaechi files in court. The Federal High Court admits the case and issues an interim order preventing INEC from recognizing Atiku's nomination pending the hearing. This drags the ADC into months of litigation, exactly the endless litigation that drove Obi and Kwankwaso away in the first place. The ADC enters 2027 without a formally recognized candidate until late in the electoral cycle, severely damaging its campaign capacity. Scenario 3. Amaechi exits. ADC fractures further. Probability 15%. Rather than court, Amaechi and possibly Hayatudeen both exit ADC entirely, following Obi and Kwankwaso to NDC or returning to APC or PDP. The ADC is then a northern-weighted Atiku-only platform with significantly reduced national spread. In this scenario, the 2027 race becomes Tinubu versus Atiku versus Obi Kwankwaso, and the split opposition hands Tinubu a second term without breaking a sweat. So here is my verdict, and I will not fence-sit on this. Atiku Abubakar has won the ADC presidential primary. The numbers, wherever they came from, are in his favor. And in Nigerian law, possession of a declared result carries enormous legal weight. But the manner of this win has done real damage. A party that built its identity on being an alternative to the impunity of the APC and PDP cannot afford to conduct a primary that its own spokesman cannot defend. A movement that recruited on the promise of credibility cannot start with a process that 2 of its 3 aspirants have publicly denounced as fraudulent. Atiku is the ADC's candidate, but he is entering 2027 as a wounded frontman of a fractured coalition in a party still bleeding from the Obi-Kwankwaso departure, carrying the weight of a primary that smells of the same old Nigeria. Here is my closing line, and I want you to remember it. An opposition that rigged its own primary has already told you what kind of government it plans to run. That is not my opinion. That is Nigerian political history speaking. Dear viewers, this analysis didn't make itself. tracking results across 14 states, breaking down the Electoral Act and all, took hours of real independent research. No simple Google searches, no AI copy, just deep, unfiltered truth, because you deserve to understand what's actually happening to our country. But this channel cannot survive on passion alone. It only works if you decide it matters. If you learned something today, hit that subscribe button right now and share this video with just one person. Real analysis spreads through people who care, not algorithms. Stay close, because up next we are diving into the Obi-Kwankwaso alliance and whether a three-way race is actually Tinubu's biggest advantage for 2027. This is more than a channel, it's a movement. Until next time, stay unfiltered.